Hi students, Mr. Clucky here. Move my computer so you guys can see a little bit better. There we go. So I am screencasting with you and I'm going to show you a little bit about graphing today. All right. In class, we're practicing making graphs by hand and I'm going to show you how to work on a graph by hand here using my smartboard that's over here. Um, while watching this, I would like you guys to have this window open, watching me teach you how to make a graph, but at the same time, I want you to have a window open with the graph data, and that should be found on that Google Hyperdoc, and it's going to look something like this image that's right here. And the reason I'm having you do that is because you're not going to be able to see where you're at, what I'm referring to on here, unless you're looking at it on your computer. And then in addition, I think it's helpful if you're also making these graphs at the exact same time. So if you have like a blank sheet of paper, or even better, if you have graph paper that looks like this, make sure you have that out and you're following along with me. But if you have a blank sheet of paper or a sheet of notebook paper, that should work just as fine. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the data that says genre of book and amount of read pages. All right, and we're going to make this graph by hand. Now, before I make this graph, the first question I'm going to ask myself is, number one, what type of graph am I going to make? All right, if you think back to our graphing notes and you remember, our three types of graphs that we can possibly make are bar graphs, line graphs, and pie charts. All right, and to determine which graph we want to make, we need to ask ourselves the question of, well, what is our data saying, right? What data are we having here? And if we look at our data, we're having genres of books and amount of read pages. Notice we have an amount, and that should tell us right away that we're going to be making a bar graph. So our first graph we're going to make today is a bar graph. So here I'm going to use my graph paper. Ooh, and I've got a bug flying around. I'm going to use my graph paper here, and I'm going to get my graph prepared. All right, so first things first is I am going to figure out what our x and y axis is going to be. All right, remember in a bar graph, it doesn't matter which way our bars move. They can go left or right, or they can go up and down. And just because I think it'd be easier to go up and down here, because if we look at our data, we've got a lot of pages that are going to get read, right? We have 1,200 and 1,700 pages. That's a lot. And I need a lot of space to make that bar, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and make my bar graph here. And I'm going to start by just labeling what my scale is going to be. So I'll start at 0 here, and I'll work my way up. And I'm actually going to make my marker a little bit thinner here, so it's a little easier to see, hopefully. Okay. And I'm going to, there we go. And now let's see how that works. Okay, so I'm going to have 0 right here. And then I'm going to increase by a specific amount. Remember, that was our increment. All right, and I'm going to say, looking at this, they're all in the hundreds. Let's increase by 100 each time. So I got 0, I've got 100. Okay, and I'm leaving one line in between. Then we've got 200, 300, 400, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. And then for 1,000, I'm going to put 1K. Usually that's our abbreviation for 1,000. I'm going to put 1K, and I would put 1,100, 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 500, 600. And if you'll notice, I got to go up quite a bit here. I've got to go up to at least 1,700. So I'll keep going. 1,700, 1,800, 1,900, and last one, 2,000. Whew. All right. So now I've got my y-axis drawn, which is the amount of pages read, and now I need to label it. Okay. That's one of the things that we're going to need on our graphs is a label. So I'm going to put right here amount read, and I need to indicate what unit I'm using. So I'm going to put in here that that is pages. Because without that, we don't know if is this a number of books, is it number of words, number of sentences, right? So we need to let people know what we're doing here. On the x-axis, I'm going to go ahead and put my other data point. So I've got amount of read pages done. Now I need to do the genre of book. And that's going to go across the bottom. So I'm going to put right here, I'm going to abbreviate M for mystery, S for sports, R for romance, B for biography, and S for science. Okay? Hopefully you guys are able to see that there. Normally, if I had more room, I would write those words out, but because there's limited space here, I'm going to just abbreviate. And then the last thing I have to do, just like over here, I have to put my label. And my label for those is going to be genre of book. And again, normally if I had a little bit more room, I would put that at the very bottom of the page, right? But because notice I'm running out of space on here, I'm putting it off to the side. So people know what these are. Those are the genres of books. Now, I just have to graph it. So I'll go ahead and graph my points. So I've got mystery book, which is 1,200 pages. So we'll find 1,200, which is right here. And go ahead and we'll make our bar. I always enjoy this part. This is the fun part where I get to color it in. And then sports, we'll notice, is at 500. We'll find 500, under bar, make our bar. Romance had 800 pages read, so we'll find 800, go across. Notice we have that vertical bar graph being made. And then we have biography, 200, not a very well-read book. 200. And then science, right? And science is 1,700, so I gotta go all the way up here. And notice that is a very large bar. And color that in. All right, now you might think that you're done here, but we really aren't. All right, we have to do a few more things. So remember back to those notes, there were 5 or 6 things we were looking for, right? One of them is a title. I don't have a title yet. So I'm going to go back and make a title for this. Now, to figure out what kind of title you want to make, you need to think about, well, what does my graph show? Well, I've got amount of pages read and genres of books. So a good title that tells me what this graph is about is I might title this pages read of various types of books. So I'm going to write that at the very top. Pages read of various types of books. All right, so I've got my title, I've got my scale, I have my units labeled. Now, do I need a key on this graph? Right? And if you remember back, the only graph that needed a key was a pie chart. So we will not need a key on this graph, so we can go ahead and cross that one off. However, I do need a legend. All right, and remember, legend is a conclusion, something about this graph. So looking at this graph here, what's a conclusion that we can make about it? One conclusion that I see is science was the most read book, or I might say that biographies were the least read. And I'm going to write that at the very bottom of the graph. And again, I don't have any space here, so I'll write it off to the side and I'll say, you guys can see over here, science was the most read book. And there we go. All right. So now you'll notice using this, I have a properly drawn graph that would receive full credit if I were to turn this in for class. I've got a title, I've got my scale, I've got my units that are labeled. I don't need a key, but I have my legend. And now I'm done. So hopefully you guys can keep this as a reference. Hopefully you've modeled this graph as well. And now you need to watch the second video to see how would we make that line graph.